my man. Thank you for coming, bro. Great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Dan.
Dude, my first beef with you is how could you not have told me earlier about Discord? I love Discord. I'm like a week into it, and I'm like just getting my hands on it. I think it's the coolest thing ever. Like, why has it taken me so long? Why didn't you push me?
Well, to be quite honest, I had no idea that you've been interested in that.
Come on, man. I mean, crypto, this is the community, bro. What? Like, you're supposed to be plugging me in. Like, this is what the relationship is about.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And like for quite a while, Discord has been the community of gamers and just people who try to switch away from TeamViewer and Skype and just like get onto something new, something functional. And I've personally started using Discord like I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe 6. So for me, it was like a casual thing. I was actually telling everyone,
Did you get introduced to it through gaming? Is that what?
Yeah. I had actually managed like game servers, and I've been doing some admin stuff, and that's been my kind of like a high school gig. So that has been fun hobby of mine, and I've got introduced to Discord, and my friends moved over there from Skype and all the other places, and then even in the firm that I've joined. Like my previous employer, we've actually decided to go with the Discord as like the main channel of communication.
Unbelievable.
So better than Slack.
Like
actually.
I was just about to say, yeah, because so what I noticed in Discord is like you can create the separate channels and you can create different like functionalities within the different channels. So like for example, I can have a job board where I don't want everyone to comment and post their thoughts and candidacy about every job. But I do have a centralized location where if you're in there for the chat, you can also go into this thread and look at the jobs. I think that's so cool. I think that's like the beauty of Discord is like it allows you to kind of organize the threads in a really productive way, and the community that's there is already really, we're all kind of bonded on this stuff. So it's just been really productive,
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that it's kind of like the next stage when it comes to social media, right? Because nowadays, people try to communicate, through messengers, right? And Discord is kind of like a good hybrid between having like a traditional messenger where you can call someone or where you can text someone, and then also having the capacity to actually create servers and create these communities, and also like create bots, right? Because a big part of Discord that makes it very successful is that allows developers and just regular users to quickly create bots and extend the functionality. So music bots or like app specific bots, notification bots, anything like that. I think it creates a very like unique, I would say.
But tell me more about these bots. Tell me more about these bots because I'm kind of just getting into it. But I know what you're talking about, and I get that the bots help like organize the community and assign certain roles to the new joiners and stuff. But yeah, tell me more about what these bots can do for the community.
Yeah, so it really depends on what your use case is, right? So for example, like a frequent use in my case has been having bots that would, for example, provide daily reports. So say like I have a strategy running and I need to get a sense of like what is sort of what like performance metrics am I getting today? And what would happen is that I would calculate the performance metrics or generate report, and then that report would be sent to me directly as a direct message in Discord. In your case, that can be anything from advertising new posts or like asking people to join a poll or do something that requires them to act and for you to get insight. And the thing that, Discord bots accomplish that goal really, really well.
So like, would it be, so let's say I post a new job on LinkedIn, right? Could I create a bot that would take that LinkedIn job
and automatically send it to the channel? Yeah,
nice.
It's gonna be a very easy way for you to reshare, and you don't need to go in and say, "Hey guys, we've got a new job posting." So
shout out to all my community managers, especially Will the Trill for helping me set it up. I need more bots.
Shout out to Will.
Shout out to you, Will. So help me out with some new bots. What's the music bot? I gotta ask.
Oh man, so you can connect like Spotify or some sort of other music platform, and you can essentially like stream your playlist. Or you can even like have people vote for different genre music or like different artists. So it's really cool. You can specify that as well.
All right. So segue into exactly what I was telling you, Marty, before. Listen, Marty, you're on Twitch starting in like 2 weeks. We're gonna have a regularly scheduled session, Saturday morning sessions with Marty, right?
DJ bot.
Hell yeah. Right? Wouldn't that be dope for the community?
No, 100%.
All right, you can chat in the Discord, and then you can also watch Marty on Twitch, and he could talk to you back in the mic. And we can really get some cool stuff going on.
100%.
Like one other thing I was thinking about regarding Discord is like, I've never really been in an app or a chat room where the community is that, what's the word, tight knit or kind of on the same page. Like it's, you feel that energy right away, right? And I was sort of thinking about it, and the only thing that I could kind of compare to it, which the more I thought about it, it's super comparable, is in the beginning of the pandemic, 2018, like right when like the first like hardcore lockdown happened, I actually started a online poker game with my friends, right,
Nice.
on this Poker 2 app, right? And about 25 of us would get together every Tuesday. Actually, we still do it every Tuesday at 9 p.m. on this app. And the funny thing is, it was me setting it up, right? So no one else really knew each other, but I knew like separately all of these 25 people. And then, it came to be a friend of a friend here, a friend of a friend there. And what I noticed is, after a couple weeks of this, there's a chat option within the poker game, right? Mm-hmm. So all of these people who don't know each other, never met each other, became like friends, and now we have like little inside jokes or whatever, and everyone kind of knows their nuances of their personalities and stuff, but have no idea who each other is in real life, and that's a community. You know what I mean? That's a community, and that's what Discord is. It's it's interesting about Discord because most of the people are anonymous, right? So you kind of have an extra layer of comfort to like to speak your truth a little bit, right?
Sure, for sure.
But since you're in a tight network, you know that okay, you have to get invited to this server. So you're a friend of Dan's, you're a friend of Vlad's, you're a friend of Marty's. We can keep it real in this room,
100%.
So that's my thoughts on the community, and I love it. Cool. So, listen, why don't we tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? We're going to get into our whole story, how we know each other. But let's start with where you were at when we first met, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure, yeah. That's been a great time, man. That's been, I would say, almost a year ago. Pandemic.
Dark times.
Yeah, dark times. So I've been working for the prop trading firm. I graduated, worked for almost a year in a hedge fund and then a prop trading firm, and I've been in a position where I've been conducting research on different alpha strategies, trying to build out a portfolio together with my PM. It's been a very interesting experience, but at some point I realized that I'm looking for something different. Specifically, after switching from hedge fund and from this kind of like big environment.
So why don't we take it back a little bit further? You graduated from where?
So I've graduated from Claremont Mechanic College, which is a school in Southern California.
Okay,
I've
cool.
also spent a year at Stanford University doing some of the coursework in computer science and financial engineering, which has been a very interesting and a very great experience that I really appreciate. And I graduated from Claremont with a degree in financial economics and data science. So I've been able to do my degree in 3 years instead of 4 years by actually taking classes during the summer and doing internships full time while studying. So it's been quite insane trying to take 4 classes plus work 40, 50 hours a week, but somehow I managed to pull it off, and luckily I've been able to get my degree. I've been invited to join one of the leading cryptocurrency hedge funds. After...
Why don't you tell them about your job? Were you still in school when you were doing the baseball thing, or?
Oh, yeah. So my last semester, I actually been working with the late Dodgers. I've been working with my team on getting the non-parametric probabilistic models for trying to essentially like the goal was to build models so that we could figure out which players in MLB, specifically, like a late Dodgers team, obviously, which ones are the better ones. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at the first baseman specifically, so we were trying to figure out which player has a better fielding efficiency. And we've used parametric and non-parametric models. Mm-hmm. Majority of them were obviously probabilistic because that was the end goal, but there were some other models that we've used during the preliminary data analysis and some of the steps before we actually dived into the major part of building the model. And so what happened is that we've had 2 teams, and I've been working with my team on getting those non-parametric models, so neural networks, getting some of the other traditional machine learning models, and trying to build kind of like a pipeline of getting the data from MLB's StatCast. And MLB StatCast, just so you understand, it's a huge number of cameras which are located in different stadiums, right? So whenever players play in these stadiums, all of the data is recorded through cameras, then analyzed, processed, and then they generate spreadsheets, they generate some sort of like tabular data that you can later leverage for analysis. And you can, for example, come in, ask your analyst to perform analysis on that specific data and draw some conclusion, for example, of, hey, is this player been performing or underperforming, overperforming, whatever else?
So you had fun time on that?
Yeah, so people would actually joke and say, Vlad, you've been that guy from the Moneyball, which has been pretty fun, and it's been a great project. I've been working with Scott Powers, who actually just recently transitioned to become the assistant general manager of Houston Astros. So Scott, if you're watching this, congratulations! I'm very happy for you, man.
That's awesome.
And he's been with Dodgers, and I've met him at Stanford. We've had a lot of great talks together. He's an excellent guy, very very smart, very professional, and at the end of the day, we've got my university connected with LA Dodgers. We've had people work for LA Dodgers, and then after this experience conducting quantitative research, for me things were very clear. I've been trading crypto ever since I was out of high school.
Stop. Stop.
So hedge fund was the obvious choice, man.
TradFi people, this is what you're competing with, okay?
Oh,
this
man.
guy's been trading crypto since he was in high school. When did you first learn to code?
When I was so look, I've started using computer when I was 3 years old. I would be sitting and I would be playing puzzle games. I would start coding probably when I was 9, 10-ish maybe, because look, like when I was 9, 10-ish in Ukraine, like in middle school and in elementary school, and also even in high school, we still have the classes of computer literacy and computer science, right? So first, they get you the basics, so using programs, how to work with Windows. They kind of like give you an insight sometimes even into Mac OS and Linux, and you get yourself familiar with just using GUI and like how it works, like how to create documents in Word, Excel, and stuff like that. And then over time, they try to introduce it to more challenging tools. For example, Photoshop is one of them. Like when I was in middle school, I would be already Photoshopping memes and doing stuff like that. So that's been quite fun.
So this is everyone in your country, or this is you taking like above and beyond initiative?
So I would say that it really depends, right? Some kids obviously skip those classes, and some kids really like stick with it. I personally love that. That was my favorite subject. Computer science always been my favorite thing. And yeah, I've learned to code first in Pascal. Pascal is one of the computer science languages, like that pretty much has been taught back in the 90s and 80s. It's been pretty old. But then over time...
when did you start learning C++?
I started learning C++ when I was 12, and then by the age of 14, I won my first computer science hackathon from Intel and Microsoft, actually beating some of the, most accomplished, like, academics and also software engineers in Ukraine, which has been really fun. And yeah, actually the project with C++ has kind of stuck with me through all the years, because people very frequently ask about it, and they're like, hey, like, this is a pretty big deal. This is like a national hackathon. Like, what did you do, right? And so I usually tell them about this project that I came to the hackathon, and I've seen that there is just a bunch of stuff given to you. So they give you the microcomputer called Intel Edison. They give you essentially like a laptop you can develop on. They give you all of the software tools you need, and all you need to do is you need to create something that would just leverage the Microsoft Azure, which is the cloud platform, and also some of the machine learning and data analysis capabilities of their platform. So what I've decided to do is I've decided to put together a research satellite, basically taking the Intel Edison platform, adding a bunch of sensors onto it, creating some pretty sweet features like trying to control the orientation in the space, trying to determine orientation in the space, trying to also get some of the metrics from the satellite. And then after this, I was processing the data, getting that data into the cloud via middleware, and then analyzing that data and displaying it nicely in graphs.
Awesome.
And that has been done in the 8 hours, which was just a typical day, right? And typical work day. And the cool part about it is it was one of the first time I realized that, hey, like if I drink coffee, then I'm gonna be pretty productive. So that has been a fun experience of mine.
Yeah, I won't even mention the tonic and espresso that you made me drink.
Oh yeah, no,
That's a good one.
that's one of my favorite drinks. Tonic and espresso. If you don't
Mm.
drink alcohol, it goes a long way.
Whatever gets the job done, bro.
Exactly.
If it works for you, it works for me.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right, so let's forward the conversation. So, a few before we met, you did have one prior project in crypto. You were working for about 6 months, but tell the listeners about your TradFi experience before we get fully into crypto.
Sure. So, I wouldn't say that I've personally worked in traditional finance in the capacity of like anyone else, right? So, for example, my colleague, he's been leading a desk at Goldman Sachs for 15 years, and like the level of experience that guys at our current firm have is just it's astonishing. I mean, they've been on Wall Street for 20 years, 15 years, and they're veterans, right? Like, they know everything, they know all the inside outs, and so for me, it's a great learning experience, and like working with these guys is an absolute pleasure, and also like I'm very fortunate that I have this opportunity. And like when I was in school, the material that we've been taught, it's been very like traditional finance focused, and like at the end of the day, curriculum doesn't get updated that frequently, right? So whenever you take a class, like I've personally taken a class called Investments and Valuation, which is one of the kind of like modern portfolio theory classes that's been taught at Claremont, and that class is focused on the like fundamental idea that a lot of like people in academia follow, that the markets are just efficient. And the efficient market hypothesis does make sense, and I think it's kind of like one of the extremes, right? So you have two extremes, the inefficiency and efficiency. And I think that depending on the asset class, right, you have like a place in the middle of these two extremes. So when I look at equities, for example, I would rather say that they're very, very efficient, but then it's, in my opinion, not the right thing to say that they are not having any alpha that can be gathered. I mean, people make mistakes, market make mistakes. It's impossible for any market to be efficient unless the world would be just ideal, but the world is never perfect, right? And crypto is on the other end of the spectrum, where crypto is, in my eyes, is highly inefficient, meaning that the number of alpha opportunities that we have today it's an insane amount of opportunities compared to what it is in equities. And it's very similar to equities back in the day when computer assisted trading hasn't even been too much of a thing, right? So I would say from that perspective, we've been told very old principles, but I think that those are fundamental. Like crypto is still an asset type. It's still a part of finance, right? You can't reject principles, you can't reject models. You can't go ahead and just say like, hey, I'm going to invent a new way to do quant finance in crypto. You still have to stick with a lot of concepts that are taught in traditional finance. And so the only thing that I would say is I've been fortunate to get the very solid foundation. And then once I realized the principles of general markets and like different, for example, fixed income markets and equities and also different derivatives, I realized how can I transition that knowledge onto the new level, onto something fresh, which is crypto, right?
Indeed.
And there you go.
That's
there you
it.
go.
So let's take it back to when we first started talking, right? So at this point in your life, your career, you have a strong academic background from a really top school in traditional finance. You've been trading crypto on your own since you were in high school. You've been coding since you were 12, and you had a 6-month or so project in crypto that you'd been working on already. So that's kind of that's the setting the table for where you're at now. At this point, you kind of have your pick of the litter. At this point, you could work for a big traditional finance hedge fund. You could work for a big TradFi hedge fund that's getting into crypto. You could work for a crypto startup. So you have all these different avenues in front of you, and you were exploring the market pretty broadly. So talk about your mindset at that time and how you felt about the different opportunities that were coming across your desk.
Sure, yeah, and well, then first of all, thank you so much. It's it's very, very kind words. I want to believe that my background is very strong. So I would say that when I was in this position, for me, it's been very interesting to explore different opportunities and get a sense of the market, right? Because, like, I personally knew that I'm the type of a guy who's not going to be working in tech. And the reason is quite simple, right? So after I worked for a crypto hedge fund and then I worked for that prop trading firm, I realized that, and before this, just so you know, like, I've worked for a startup in Silicon Valley. I mean, I've been working there for like 6 or 7 months, and I've been building, production code together with other engineers when I was like, sophomore in college. So the thing is that, like, when I was working in tech and then I transitioned onto quant finance, for me there were a few things clear. Well, first of all, I'm very competitive, and that kind of sticks out from my experience and from the things that I'm obviously doing. So I do like competitive aspect, and for me, job is just, it's another part of my life, right? And so I would want to be competitive in that aspect. And so for me, being in a tech firm is not the easiest way to continue competing with others, right? Because at the end of the day, like, people in tech firms are builders, and I like building stuff. But at the same time, I think that when there's competition, it just fuels your, like, ambition in a way.
Indeed,
and
yeah.
so for me, that aspect of competitive spirit has been a very big one.
It's great. It's great to have the competitive spirit. Obviously, if you're competitive, you want to be in trading because then you get rewarded.
Exactly.
Right?
You kind of you eat what you kill, right?
And by the way, that competitive nature definitely comes out in the interview process, and I think that's a huge part of what makes you such an attractive candidate. But
yeah, thank you. And I'm gonna say that, like, when you have, for example, 1,000 people apply for one position, obviously you have to be competitive. Mm-hmm. There's no way you're gonna get an interview unless you know how to properly market yourself and how to demonstrate that you're capable.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, like, one thing is being capable, one thing is being great, but then the other thing is actually being able to present that to the interviewer, and also being able to present that in the work that you do, and
we're gonna circle back to that when we start to talk about how you closed out that offer.
100%.
I mean, that was incredible.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
Let's take it back to where we're at. So continue.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that. Like, the competitive aspect is obviously one thing, right? The other thing is that quant finance is very, like, rapidly growing and very rapidly changing field, right? So, like, technology that we use today might not be the technology we're going to be using tomorrow. We usually try new things. We try to perform research with cutting edge technology. Well, it doesn't happen all the time, obviously, because you can't conduct research without using the old methods. But at the same time, we try to incorporate new data sources. We try to incorporate new tools, new models, new things, right? Whenever you have, for example, a research paper published by the leading organization dealing with, like, new NLP models, we would be looking at that. So in the case of, like, the getting like the new technology, and I'm a huge fan of technology, I'm a geek, right? So for me, getting something new to play with would obviously be very fun. And in the field of, tech, I would say you also get those things, but the level and, like, the speed at which you get it is not always the same. And finally, quant finance is just a very interesting thing to me because my parents are investors, and I'm coming from quite traditional finance background and family, right? So, like, at the end of the day, I think that it makes sense that I'm attracted to the markets. I'm attracted to the idea of being able to sell, for example, crypto, and then stake it, and then farm it, and then do whatever else. At the end of the day, I think that the slogan of my college is civilization prospers in commerce. And I think that it makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, globalization and many different other things that have occurred. So, majority of the change in the world, majority of the progress that we've seen over hundreds of years has been because of the trade, right? And so I think that without trading, we would not be able to arrive at the place where we at, both from the technological standpoint and also from the prosperity standpoint, the wealth standpoint.
So back to that moment, right? So so I understand that you're excited by quant finance, but you also wanted something that was next level, right? And that's crypto. So you had your pick of the litter. Take me to your mindset now as you start interviewing with the big companies and then the small companies, and as you progress down that road, like, let's get into, like, what you were thinking at that time.
Sure. So, like one of the things that I've done is I've compiled a list of different firms, and I personally had a lot of friends who already worked at the big ones. For me, like the number of firms has been pretty big because I first of all had people working there.
Right.
So I had the community that I could come to and ask questions. And also I've been doing a lot of research on my own, right? So for example, I'd spend time and I would try to get a sense of like, oh, what are the best firms in high frequency trading, or what are the best firms in crypto? So I'd be looking and trying to sort firms by asset class. Primarily, I was targeting crypto because I thought that I would have the highest chance of getting a job there. Because first of all, I had experience, and second of all, it's been kind of like a very native environment for me, right? I mean, I've been trading for like 4 years, so it makes sense. Plus, I had professional experience. So I would take all the firms, put them in the spreadsheet. I would get contacts. I would try to get in touch with people, get a sense of, what the firm is doing, get a sense of what is the good fit for me, right? Because I think that it's not only about you getting hundreds of different offers and they taking one, but then making sure that the fit for your personality and your professional goals is really well aligned.
100%.
And so, I've taken all these different firms. I've selected some that I thought would be a good fit for me personally, and I've decided to apply. Some of them I've applied to recruiters. Some of them I've applied on their websites. So until I met you, a lot of my hiring efforts have been, targeted at just working with different people and trying to do it on my own as well. But then at some point, I've had you in the network for more than a year for sure. So before that, so I knew about the positions that you were looking for. I knew about some of the hiring that you were doing, and I always seen your posts and I was like, Dan is a great guy, but I never actually had a chance to like speak to you. And so for me, it was very nice to finally message you and get a response from you, and then get on a call to discuss one of the opportunities you had in mind. And then as soon as this happened, I was like, wow, Dan is a great guy. Dan is certainly the one who can help me with my goal. And so we've started working together with you. You've had the opportunity that just came up like just in time.
Crazy.
And it worked out real well. I've had an interview. I've had actually several interviews, and we're going to come back to this. But
the timing of that was amazing.
Yeah, the timing of that was just perfect. Like
Yeah,
it could have been, it could have not been better. I can tell you that.
For real. So okay, at that time you were pretty far along with some big companies, right? And at this point, it was early for me in my journey of meeting all these startup crypto hedge funds and really understanding the value that they have in the market compared to a Citadel, Aquatic, etc. Right? So I kind of didn't really know how to approach it. And I was just, I thought at that time, you know what? Let me just be a good friend to this guy, Vlad. He seems like a good kid, and hopefully it'll work out. And thankfully it did, right? But we formed this cool relationship, and you were telling me about the interview process for the big companies as you went through. So let's start there. Like, what did you feel like interviewing for those companies?
Yeah. So then 100% agree with everything you said, and it's honestly like a big pleasure that you and I have had an opportunity to meet and like build this relationship. So thank you so much. And for me, like interviewing process has been obviously a very challenging one because working full-time on research, I've been actually the product owner of the research framework and leading all of the research efforts in the firm, which were related to alpha. And so for me, it was very difficult to try and find time to, first of all, conduct research, which takes time. Second of all, manage an intern who also has been working with me. In addition to that, I've had my family, things that I had to take care of, and it's been very good to spend some time with family back home. And finally, I had to find a job, and I had some other things that I needed to do, and so finding the job has pretty much sucked all of my time up, and so I've had a bunch of applications, and I've had these interviews. And for me, like it started to get very apparent, like as soon as I started interviewing with bigger firms and then smaller firms and medium-sized firms, I started realizing what is the difference, right? I started looking into the processes, into kind of feedback that I'm getting, and, the time frames. Because at the end of the day, like when you're applying for a small firm, you're going to get a lot more attention, right? People are going to be most likely speaking to you right away without any tests, without any exams, without any screenings, right? As far as your resume looks good, there's going to be someone who's going to reach out and who's going to at least look into your candidacy. At the same time,
a real decision maker.
A real decision maker, right? Not an automated like robot or like somebody just sitting there and reading your resumes, right? Because automatic recruitment pipelines do make sense, and like, don't get me wrong, I understand the reason why they're there. But at the same time, one thing that I personally appreciated is that medium and small sized companies, they would usually let you explain your background and kind of like get you through the first round so that you can get and move along in the process. While at the same time, the bigger firms sometimes would give just a bunch of tests, and then you would be sitting doing these tests and you would be exhausted, and then your performance on these tests obviously would go down, and then you're just not going to get selected. But at the end of the day, I think the big issue is that the tests that are being given, at least for the bigger firms, I've seen that half of them do not correlate in any way with the job and tasks that you're performing, right? So like, why would you want me to do something very complex when in reality I'm never going to be doing that? And again, I know the answer, right? The point is trying to select people who are the most capable. But at the same time, the capability in one specific area doesn't mean that you're incapable in the other area. And it's about being well-rounded, in my opinion, right? You have to have the skill set that extends beyond just knowledge of mathematics, for example, or just beyond the knowledge of computer science. And so I would say that when I was interviewing for the firm, that I'm currently in, for Outremont, I personally had so much attention, and I've had so much capacity to show my ability that I've been very happy about it. Like I felt special in a way, because thing is that when you
see, sorry to cut you off, but I think it's important to highlight that in a bigger TradFi company or a non-crypto native company, you talk about being well-rounded. They might not need someone who's well-rounded, they want you for one thing. You trade crypto, but you've also programmed in C++ for so long. Maybe they only want your C++ because they're so big and siloed that this is all they need you for. Now, how does that make you feel as an employee, right? You feel like, oh, you're just using me for one thing, whereas I want to grow. And, what does that say about the culture of the company? So talk to me about the culture of a TradFi company compared to the culture of a crypto native company.
Well, so first of all, I would want to come back to the point of, being very specific, right? So, having a very specific task that you would be performing as an employee. So, I personally know that there are people that work, for example, in quant research, and so their job is some arbitrary split between 50%, research, 50% development of the strategies, and just writing, research code. But then also the split can be 70-30 or 80-20. But the issue is that when you hire a quantitative researcher, right, and I'm being very specific here because that's the position I've been applying for, I think that it's not only about you being a math genius, right? Because at the end of the day, I've seen people that are absolutely brilliant in math. They're just prodigies, right? They can go ahead and they can get a PhD in mathematics in a year or two. Now, the issue is that when you're hiring someone to work on alpha research, in my eyes, you should be hiring not someone who's a math prodigy or hiring a whole team of math prodigies who don't know how to code. You need to hire people who are well balanced, right? And this is my point, that the interviews sometimes are very disbalanced, right? The interview would give you a bunch of math questions, and then they would just straight up reject any computer science questions, and then they would keep that for the second round, right? So that would be one of the concerns in my head, because if you have a good math skills, if you have good computer science skills, then that should be enough. It shouldn't be that you have some sort of disbalance, right? And again, I understand that it's position by position basis, but when you apply to many of these firms and you see the trend, right? And the trend is quite simple. For quantitative researchers, they want only PhDs, they want only math geniuses, and they don't care about anything else. And this is my concern, right? Like when I apply as a candidate, I have to compete with Stanford PhD or with somebody else, even though I might be same if not better at the job. Maybe I'm gonna be worse, of course, but like the point is that I'm not even given a chance, right? So that is one of the big issues when we're talking about traditional finance firms and then crypto firms, is that crypto firms do give a chance, and I think that,
and that's an ego thing, in my opinion. In my opinion,
I don't know, maybe it is, but look, like
there's not as much ego in crypto native cultures. That's what I feel.
Yeah, and the thing is that like at the end of the day, I think that every candidate should have an opportunity to demonstrate what he's capable of, right? And it's not about just rejecting someone based on, 5 questions that they asked about linear algebra. I mean, thing is that also, like when you go to crypto, everyone has a realistic expectation, right? So like when you hire someone, you already know that we need this like array of different skills. But then you understand that it's not about like finding the best in the world. It's about finding the best available people, right? Because like sometimes you would be, like sometimes you can't hire the best in the world, right? Because best in the world are just not in your place and they're not interested, right? And so in this way, I think that crypto firms are doing the right thing because they're trying to find the best people available and the best people fitting for the job.
So the way I kind of interpret that is a little bit differently. I agree, but the way I see it is more the attitude from in hiring in crypto is more, if you can add value somehow, you're welcome. We'll find a place for you. We'll find an appropriate room for you. Whereas in TradFi or Web2, it's you feel like there's a gate, that you have to get through, and there's a gatekeeper, right? And I feel like that's rooted in ego that's in the company culture, which I feel crypto company don't have that same ego that's deeply rooted in their culture. Does that make sense?
No, I agree. I think that, obviously there's more leeway for you to develop your skills, and like, the general principle obvious is that when you're looking at majority of crypto firms, they're startups, right? They're smaller firms. When you're looking into traditional finance, they're ginormous. There are thousands of employees, at least.
But I'm actually even talking about the ginormous TradFi companies that are getting into crypto. I won't say them by names, but you know the ones.
Yeah, for sure. About. But what I'm trying to say is that like when the firm is small, you try to hire more generalists, people who have a bigger, like number of skills and that are able to carry out different tasks and different duties. When you're a big firm, then you're looking for specialists, and specialists are the people who are really good at doing one thing, right? So it does explain it, but at the same time, I don't think that, quant finance is, in my opinion, it's not always about hiring specialists. I think that there is a huge benefit of having generalists on your research team, for example, because research is the process of discovery, meaning that you come in, you try to find something that nobody else found or execute something better than somebody else tried or didn't try. So in my eyes, when you have people with, a skill set that includes, for example, different areas of AI, it's way better in some cases for the quant team than having a guy who's an excellent NLP researcher, super accomplished, but then all he can do is NLP, right? Because at the end of the day, like you might not get lucky and the data is going to be bad. Like in crypto, a big issue is having sentiment data. Like the good sentiment data costs a lot of money, and then also it does require, in majority of cases, some pre-processing, and also for any high-frequency applications, if you want to, for example, get the social data from social media and immediately react towards the sentiment of that, it's really hard, right? Because you need to pre-process the data, and they're not just nothing really in place right now. There are only few firms that do this, and it's still at the level where for many trading firms it's just not enough. It means that there should be something better so that you can extract more alpha. And obviously as time goes on and markets are already way more institutionalized, the social media is not going to dictate too much of the crypto prices in my head, right? It's probably going to have less impact over time because majority of the impact is going to be carried out by the big firms and the big guys, the big fish. So that's how I would see it. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe instead what is going to happen is that it's still going to be driven by market sentiment, and maybe there will be companies that are just going to trade purely of sentiment. I don't know. It would be very interesting to see. But the point is that, in coming back to our question, I think when you look at a traditional finance firm, the big firm, obviously they have a very rigid framework, right? They have some guidelines that I have to follow. They have budget. They have specific requirements. And the biggest issue in my eyes is that they have people who do not know who they're hiring. So the problem is that what I've seen is that people in HR, and don't get me wrong, like, I have nothing against people in HR. The issue is that people in HR usually hire engineers the same way how they would be hiring someone to work in HR. And this is just plain wrong. You cannot be hiring an engineer and then asking him what programming languages are you using, and then if engineer says C++ and then it's written C, then the engineer is going to get rejected because, well, C++ doesn't equal C, then you go and you work somewhere else. And I don't like this approach, right? I think that engineers should be hiring engineers, or at least people with technical knowledge should be hiring technical people. Because at the end of the day, like, when you come to an interview and HR person starts asking you questions about SQL, and then you're sitting there and you're trying to explain that, hey, this is another solution, and that person says, well, your solution might work, but then it doesn't align with what I have on paper. So, like, from that perspective, you have a lot of firms where the way of hiring is just wrong, and then they lose a lot of talent.
So let's talk about what Ian did right during that interview process, because I really think he did an amazing job.
Sure.
So to set the table, you're getting further in the Outremont process at this point, and you're also further along with the other big guys, and you're starting to get frustrated because you're feeling like you're not being respected or given the right attention that you deserve, right? So in comes this opportunity with me and Ian and Outremont. First conversation went really well. How did he take it through the process, and how did he kind of win you over at that point?
Sure. So I would say that, first of all, I personally had no better experience in my life interviewing than the interview I had with my current firm, Outremont. I think that the first thing that stuck out to me was the fact that I was talking directly to PM, right, to portfolio manager. And I think that it shows that, like, you're valued. It means that you're valid as a candidate, right? It's not that you're given a test and then you're told, yeah, like, if you pass the test, you're going to talk to HR. If you talk to HR, you're going to talk to a quant. If you talk to a quant, you're going to talk to PM. And then we're going to give you another take home, and then another take home, and then maybe you're going to be speaking to someone else. And in my eyes, like, obviously it's impossible for PM to spend all the time talking to candidates. But when you're building a firm like Jan did, it's crucial to be knowing who are going to be the first hires. And it's crucial to select those people based on your vision, right? The founder's vision. And so What I think he did really, really right is that he shown me that he is interested in me contributing, and he given me ways how I could contribute. He didn't say, Vlad, like, you should be doing this, this, and that. He didn't lock me in this specific position, say that you're not going to be doing anything else. He said, well, we all have different strengths. We all have different weaknesses. And we need to complement our weaknesses and strengths in such a way that we're remaining productive and that we're able to succeed as a firm. And this is one of the things that resonated with me, because when I was interviewing with some of the other firms, they would be coming to me and they would be straight up saying that, yes, you'll be working on this specific framework, you'll be writing code for that, then you're going to be conducting this specific type of strategies, you're going to be doing this, this, and that, you're going to be reporting to that guy. And, like, over time, I realized that I've been already put in a spot that I didn't even get a chance to select. So, like, I would already be a piece of a huge machine that would just be put inside and then everything's going to work. Instead, I think that the best part that Jan did is that he took the time and he made a big effort towards finding, the pieces of the machine that come together well and they function very efficiently without having like, personal preference is neglected, right?
Yep.
Because that's very important. So for me, the interview has been very personal. You know, like Jan immediately told me about his background and he wanted to learn more about me as a candidate. And obviously I told him about my background. And so I think that the point of telling about the background is the point where you can already get a sense of where the person is coming from. You know, like it's not only, as I've said, about the numbers you see on the test or the numbers you see somewhere else. It's also, it's not about quantifying stuff. It's about getting an overall impression and then going in and trying to figure out what are these strengths, right? And how you can leverage the candidate to actually accelerate the development and growth of the firm.
Such an important point that you make, that, you know, there is no substitute for engagement directly from the founder of a company. I think it's really important for every firm to have a strong process in place for their hiring and interviews, but that's not a substitute to direct engagement.
Absolutely.
And I just think that's super important.
Yeah, and you should also know who you're going to be working for, right? Because at the end of the day, the time you spend at work, it's sometimes from one third of your day to a half of your day, maybe even more than that. And you're going to be spending probably way more time with people you work with than even your family. And thing is that at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the choice that you make is the right one. And so I think that when you go through an interview process and you don't know who you're going to be working with up until the last interview,
you're not bought in until you're not really bought in.
Yeah, up until the last round, you're just absolutely blind.
Right.
You don't know what you're going to be doing, with whom you're going to be working. You don't know anything except for the fact that they already have a spot for you, and they actually sometimes even try to avoid talking about it because they know that if the candidate finds out that he'll be put onto a specific project with a specific target, then the candidate is not going to be interested because there's no growth, right? There's no opportunity for you to develop into a better professional. And so I think that what firms that are starting out should do is that they obviously need their founder or founders to spend time talking to candidates. And Outremont is a perfect example where all of the co-founders of Outremont, meaning the Paul de Marais third, Jan, and also Francois, the three founders, all of them have spoken to me before I signed the contract. Meaning that I already knew the people who I'm going to be reporting to. I'm going to know the people I'm going to be working with. I know the people that build this company and know their vision, and I know what's going to happen in a year or 5 years. So this is why I am so invested in my firm, because I know the direction we're going, and I know that I'm a valuable member of the team, of the great team.
Agreed. So now let's get into compensation a little bit, right? So you get paid very well, obviously, in your current role. But, I mean, we all know
I like to believe so.
Indeed. But we all know that there's firms out there that are just going to overpay for people like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there are.
And you could have went somewhere else to get a bigger bag, but you chose to take this bag based on the interview process. So walk me through that.
Well, I mean, the money question is quite simple, right? At the end of the day, there are places that are going to pay you way more. There are places going to pay you way less. And at the end of the day, it's all about the utility function that you have, right? My utility function is not based purely on the salary that you have. My utility function is based on many, many different factors, from the kind of work I do, right? So the enjoyment, the pleasure I get from work. If I come to work and I spend those 12 hours working on something, or 8 hours or whatever, then if I enjoy that work, I come back home happy, right? And so that is a part of my utility function.
That's value.
And then, if you go to work and you have even 6-hour work that you hate, then your utility function probably has a pretty negative value. And no matter how much money you're going to be making, your life is still not going to be as happy unless you're making so much that probably you work and then you retire when you're 30. So the point that I wanted to say is, when I was comparing different firms, I would be looking at my personal priorities, and I would be figuring out what sort of value I can get from each firm, right? So the money is one question, right? Because obviously we need money to live, we need money to continue growing, and money fuels the world. The second thing is happiness, and happiness also fuels the world, and you want to make sure that the happiness you're getting from job and from interacting with people is a high one. The third thing you want to be looking for, in my eyes, is what is the what are the learning opportunities? What is the growth that you can experience, right? Because you can go to a firm and you can be making like a pretty good salary, but then you're going to be stuck with that salary. You're not going to be moving positions. You're going to be working in the same position for 10 years. That doesn't lead you anywhere. You're stuck, right? And I don't want to plateau. I want to continue growing. And so for me, that factor of growth has been very important. And finally, at the end of the day, it's just the question of, like your interest, right? If you're interested in crypto, you go into crypto. If you're interested in something else, you go somewhere else. So, like if your interest, if the money, if the happiness, and all of these other, parts of the equation align, then your utility function is certainly going to be way up there, and you're going to be a happy man. So for me, that has been the case, and I think that we all need to evaluate our priorities and figure out what we want, right? For some people, money is more important, but I think that at the end of the day, quant finance is the field where everyone gets paid so well that like you can't really go wrong.
Facts. So let's talk about your mindset as we get into the closing conversation with Outremont. I think that was super interesting. You did a really good job of coming super prepared to that conversation and organizing your talking points. Walk me through what was important for you to discuss on that call. What did you need to hear from Ian to make you feel comfortable, and how that went?
So just to clarify, we're talking about the final call that we've had before I signed the offer.
Correct. When you were trying to get the details of the offer and you had like a checklist of things you wanted and, and things you were willing to go without. So take me there.
Sure, yeah. So again, like the call that we had before I signed the contract, it has been, the last checklist, right? The last thing that I would go through and I would verify before I sign up, right? Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that my vision and my priorities are aligned with my portfolio manager's vision and priorities. And so communication is obviously very important, and that's why I already prepared everything, and I made sure that I'm coming in with all the talking points, and those were about obviously some of the benefits that I would be getting, about the work that I would be doing, about the possibility of me actually growing in the firm, and what kind of things should I expect, right? So, and the big one is obviously the vision, right? I've been always trying to see what is the vision of the firm, and where are we going to go? And so when I've prepared those talking points and I've talked to Jan, I would already get pretty much all the bases covered, right? I would understand every single part of my utility function. I would perform the last calculations before I signed up. And another thing is that it's always good to clarify things, right? You might be told one thing and then you expect that you'd be, for example, learning about something, and then you expect that you would be working on a specific project, or that you want to work, obviously, not that you're forced to work on. And then, something happens, and then they say, well, we found a guy who's going to be working on it. And I'm going to be honest, I had a case where I had an interview. I went to the final round, and they told me, Vlad, you're great, you're excellent, but for that specific task that we were trying to get you for that specific desk, we're not going to get you because we already got someone else. And so for me, that has been a bummer. And, I wanted to do a very specific thing. And so I said, sorry, guys, but no, I'm not going to do it. So I think that the last call is very important. It kind of wraps up the whole process, and it encapsulates it in a way so that you can kind of put it aside and you can already know that everything's set.
I think the prep you did for that call allowed you to speak really clearly on what you needed, and at the end of the day, you were happy with the results. So glad that worked out, brother.
Absolutely.
Salud.
Thank you so much.
All right, so before we wrap up here, bro, I want to jump into a few questions from our Discord community. Shout out to you guys on Discord. Thanks for participating.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the questions that a lot of the DeFi candidates are interested in is, how do you structure your on-chain data for market making and HFT?
Yeah, so I would say that my expertise certainly not in high frequency trading, but I did some low latency development. So I can tell you that, first of all, it depends on whether you're conducting research for HFT strategy or if you're running it in production, right? So the scenarios are different. If you are conducting research, you would probably be looking at the historical data. In majority of cases, it's pretty easy to find. You can use public APIs. There's a really good API that I personally love. It's called Covalent. It's currently free, and it gives you like all the insights into different DeFi addresses, and you can get balances, get transactions. You can look into different types of chains, and it's enormous. The API is wonderful. If we're talking about getting some high frequency on chain data, I think that there's not really much you can do except for using something like memspace pool, or maybe even running a full node, right? Because at the end of the day, when you run a full node, you can get all the throughput, and it's obviously going to be very low latency. But what I would say is, like when it comes to structuring the data, you want to keep in mind a few things, right? So the first one is obviously latency. And the way how you can reduce latency in the majority of the cases is properly building your infrastructure and properly writing your code. So for the infrastructure part, I would say that in order for you to reduce latency, you would want that data collection and then data pre-processing and then decision-making algorithm to be probably in one location with the exchange. So for example, Binance has an exchange in Tokyo, and if you could co-locate it, then that would be wonderful for real-time operations. And so, a general standard is that you want to be either in the same data center or maybe even in the same rack as the servers of the exchange. In crypto, unfortunately, that's not always possible. It is possible in some exchanges in some places in the world, but you would at least want to be in the same data center, I can tell you that, and you would be getting data. For example, on that node, you'd be pre-processing that data, doing everything just in the perfect, very latency optimized way, and then you would be obviously using it for the strategy. Now, when it comes to structuring the data, it's quite important to keep this simple principle, right? You're trying to minimize the amount of time that it takes from getting the raw data into getting a decision out of your model, right? And so I would say that in order to do that, there's few things, right? So you would want to optimize pre-processing methods, and usually the case of lesser, more effective, less latency intensive operations you do, the better. When it comes to simple things, obviously, if you want to do high frequency trading, you would opt out for either C++, right? If you're not doing FPGA, or if you're doing FPGA, then obviously you have Verilog, right? So again, not an expert on this. I've done some of this before, but I would say that the data structure that allows you to retrieve the information with minimum amount of costly operations is your goal. And in addition to this, obviously making sure that the whole system itself from the beginning to the end is working properly, very fast with minimum amount of latency, and you can easily do that by profiling both your memory, both your runtime, and all of the other different metrics that you're looking at. And of course, you want to have good speed, right? Like if you're co-located or if you're in the same exchange, you would probably want to make sure that the latency between all the servers is minimized as well, because majority of the time it's not the software that's causing the issue, right? Software is very quick if you write it well, but then the issue is the hardware. And currently I've seen that there are some effort from big firms like AWS, right, the Amazon Web Services, and some of the other places to actually allow FPGA servers, right? So FPGA-driven servers is quite a cool notion, and I think that's gonna be very interesting to people in high-frequency trading, if not already is, and I'm sure for guys who are, pretty much veterans in the space, for them it's gonna be already a no-brainer, pretty much.
Got it. All right, well, coming off the back of that, next question from our Discord fan. Tell me about the problems you've seen in finding the highest order of market efficiency from your on-chain assets.
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, that question refers to how do you find efficient markets, right? How do you find efficient assets that trade in a way more efficient manner than the others? So I would say that, again, market efficiency is a quite traditional finance concept, and there are a few things that dictate the market efficiency. For example, the overall access to the information, right? So the access to financial data, the number of market participants, right? So there are a bunch of different factors, and I would say that when you talk about access to financials, right, for crypto, that's very hard. You can get information about supply, and you can get information about crypto itself, about the token, but then when you look at the volumes, for example, on the exchange, we've had a study where there's actually like a proven hypothesis that exchanges just inflate the volume because that attracts more people, right? And so you would see that over time, obviously, that volume, that fake volume has decreased, right? It's not inflated as much anymore, but it has been. And so you can't really trust anyone blindly, especially when the data you're using is used for trading or any other decision making, especially when you have money at stake. So I would say that the financial data is pretty hard to get, and that is one of those sources of inefficiency. So depending on the asset, like the more financial data for the asset you have, the more valid information you have about it, probably the more effective it's going to be, because everyone's going to be familiar with it, right? And if assuming that we have a plain a level play field, right?
Level playing field.
Exactly.
I got you, bro.
Oh man, I'm
I
losing
got
words,
you.
right? But yeah, if you have that, and if everyone has equal access to data, then that should obviously be one of the factors contributing to the market efficiency. And then the other thing is obviously number of market participants, which is at this point it's kind of very easy to find, right? Because you can already track transactions, you can see the volumes that people are putting in, you can pretty much get all of the data right now out of public APIs, or maybe if you pay some money, you can get it. So I would say that when it comes to finding more efficient assets, you would want to look at all of these different factors that establish traditional, efficient market. And also you would want to look at the most popular assets, right? Because majority of cases, the most popular meaning more market participants and obviously pretty high volume. And in that case, Bitcoin is one of the examples which is a way more efficient than any other asset that you would be looking at below top 50. So that's how I would do it.
Love it, bro. Well, thanks for doing this. Thanks for answering the questions.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure always. Great to see you, my brother.
Same here.
Guys, to my listeners, if you have more questions for Vlad, you can find him in my Discord. We're going to do another podcast for sure together. So shoot me some questions for the next one. And we'll see you there. Stay up.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
My brother. Good shit.
Thank you.